When the sunset is green, you must stay unseen. The fence post cracked wrong. That's what I noticed first. The sound of wood splitting when it shouldn't have. I'd been replacing posts all afternoon in 100-degree heat and knew exactly how they were supposed to break. This one didn't break. It shattered, like something had sucked all the moisture out instantly, turned 30-year-old oak into dust. My hands were still gripping the fragments when my phone buzzed. Elena never called during work. Never. The screen showed 3 missed calls in 60 seconds. Before I could answer, a text came through. "Check the sky now." I looked west toward the sunset, and my stomach dropped into my boots. The clouds had edges of green. Not reflection green. Not natural green. The kind of green that makes your primitive brain scream run. I'd seen it twice before in my life. Once when I was 8. Once when I was 14. My grandfather had died between those 2 events, but not before grabbing my shoulders hard enough to bruise and making me swear an oath. When the green comes, you hide. You lock everything. You don't make a sound. You don't look outside. You definitely don't open any doors. He'd made me repeat it back 50 times until I could recite it in my sleep. Then he'd died 3 months later, and nobody would tell me what killed him. Just that they'd found him in the cornfield at dawn with his eyes open, staring at nothing, with a smile on his face that didn't match the terror frozen in his features. Now that same green was spreading across the horizon like gangrene, and I was 3 miles from home with maybe 15 minutes until full dark. I ran for my truck, didn't bother collecting tools, just sprinted across the field, boots catching in furrows, nearly face-planting twice. My phone rang again. Elena's face filled the screen, and I answered while running, breath coming in gasps. "Lock the doors." I managed to get out. "All of them. Windows, too. Get Ruby. Basement. Now." Elena's voice came back confused, annoyed. "Matt, what are you talking about? Ruby's watching TV and I'm making dinner. What's wrong?" I wanted to scream, wanted to reach through the phone and shake her. Instead, I forced myself calm and said very clearly, "The sunset is green. Do you understand what that means?" Silence. Then, "Oh my God, you're serious. Dead serious. I'm 10 minutes out. Don't wait for me. Take Ruby down right now." The truck door wouldn't open. I yanked the handle and it came off in my hand. The metal corroded like it had been sitting in salt water for years instead of hours. I threw it aside and climbed through the window, cutting my arm on broken glass I didn't remember breaking. The key wouldn't turn in the ignition. I tried 3 times, panic rising in my throat like bile before the engine finally caught. The dashboard clock read 7:47 p.m. Sunset was 8:03 p.m. according to the weather app I'd checked this morning. That gave me 16 minutes. The farm was 8 miles away. I could make it. Had to make it. My phone buzzed again, and I grabbed it while throwing the truck into gear, nearly driving into a ditch before getting control. The text from Elena made my heart stop. "Ruby says someone's at the door." No. No. Not yet. The sun wasn't down yet. They couldn't come before the sun was fully down. That was the rule. My grandfather had been absolutely clear about that. Except I looked at the horizon, and the sun was lower than it should be, dropping faster than physics allowed, like something was pulling it down ahead of schedule. The green was darker now, pulsing with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Or maybe my heartbeat was matching it. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor, and the truck's engine screamed, RPMs redlining, speedometer climbing past 70 on a dirt road built for 30. My phone rang, and I answered without looking. "Don't let her open it. Elena, do not let her open that door." She already did. Elena's voice was small and wrong. "Matt, there's a man in our house. He says he's from the power company. He says he needs to check our meter." I nearly drove off the road. Corrected at the last second, gravel spraying, the truck fishtailing. "Get away from him," I said. "Take Ruby and run, out the back door. Don't talk to him, don't look at him. Just run. Matt, he's very polite. He's showing me his ID badge. It looks official. Elena, that's not a person. Whatever you're looking at, it's not human. It's wearing a person shape like a costume. Please, please believe me and run." I heard a man's voice in the background, pleasant and friendly, saying something about voltage regulation. Elena laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Matt, you're being paranoid. Mr. Garrison is just doing his job. I'll make him some coffee and—" The call dropped. I tried calling back and got a busy signal that morphed into a sound like insects screaming. I tried again. Same thing. I threw the phone on the passenger seat and focused on not crashing while driving faster than I'd ever driven in my life. The farmhouse came into view and every light was on. Not just room lights. Every lamp, every overhead fixture, every outdoor floodlight blazing like we were trying to signal aircraft. The front door stood open, and I could see inside to the living room where Elena sat on the couch with a man in a power company uniform. Ruby was on the floor playing with her dolls. Everything looked completely normal, perfectly normal, the kind of normal that appears in dreams right before they turn into nightmares. I skidded to a stop in the driveway and jumped out before the truck fully stopped, leaving it in gear, engine running. The motion felt wrong, like moving through honey, air resistance that shouldn't exist. Each step toward the house took effort, like walking into a strong wind, except there was no wind. The air was completely still. I made it to the porch and stopped. The welcome mat was new. Elena must have bought it this week because I'd never seen it before. Woven fibers in a cheerful pattern with script letters that read, "Come on in, friends and family." Something about those words made my skin crawl. Come on in. An invitation. My grandfather's voice in my memory. They need permission. They can't cross a threshold without it. But once they have permission, once someone says the words, the house belongs to them. I looked at the doorframe and saw scratches in the paint. Fresh marks like someone had been testing the boundary, seeing if they could pass through. The scratches formed letters, words in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood anyway. Welcome received. Entrance granted. Transaction complete. Inside, the power company man stood up from the couch and turned to face me. He looked completely normal. Middle-aged, slight gut, thinning hair, clipboard in hand. His uniform was perfect, down to the name badge that read Dale Garrison. But his shadow was wrong. It stretched across the floor at an angle that didn't match the light source, and it had too many limbs. I counted 6 arms, 3 heads, something that might have been wings or tentacles spreading across our hardwood in a dark stain. The man smiled and his teeth were too white, too even, like someone had studied human teeth and made perfect replicas without understanding teeth aren't supposed to be that uniform. "You must be Matthew," he said in a voice that was almost right, almost human, but there were harmonics underneath, multiple voices speaking in unison with microscopic delays that made my ears ache. "Your wife was just telling me about the electrical issues you've been having." "We haven't been having electrical issues." I almost said it but stopped myself because arguing with this thing would mean engaging with it, acknowledging it as something real and present. Instead, I looked at Elena, who was smiling at the power company man with an expression I'd never seen on her face. Beatific. That was the word. She looked peaceful and happy in a way that completely erased her personality, like someone had taken my wife's face and drawn a generic, pleasant expression on it. Ruby was still playing with her dolls, but she was arranging them in patterns, geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly, circles within circles, spirals that seemed to rotate when I wasn't looking straight at them. She was humming something while she played, a tune I'd never heard her hum before. The power company man followed my gaze to Ruby and said, "Beautiful child, so well behaved. You must be very proud. Don't respond. Don't acknowledge." I forced myself to look away from the thing wearing Dale Garrison's face and focused on Elena. "Honey," I said carefully, "Ruby has a doctor's appointment. We need to leave right now." Elena's smile didn't waver. "Oh, but Mr. Garrison is still checking the meters. It would be rude to leave while he's working. He's doing us a favor, really, coming out so late. The least we can do is be good hosts." Good hosts. The words made me want to vomit. This thing had gotten inside our house by pretending to be from the power company, and now Elena was treating it like a guest we needed to accommodate. I took a step toward Ruby, and the power company man moved to block me. He didn't walk. He just was suddenly in front of me, relocating without crossing the intervening space. Up close, I could smell him. Ozone and rot, burnt hair and copper. "Careful," he said softly. "The child is playing. It's not polite to interrupt children when they're playing." I looked past him to Ruby and saw that her dolls weren't dolls anymore. They were moving on their own, tiny plastic limbs flexing and bending in ways the joints weren't designed for. As I watched, one of the Barbie dolls turned its head 180 degrees to look at me. Its painted smile seemed wider now, stretching past the edges of its face. Ruby picked it up and made it wave at me, and the doll's arm moved before Ruby's hand did, like it was controlling her instead of the other way around. "Ruby," I said, keeping my voice level, "put the toys down and come to Daddy." Ruby looked up at me with eyes that were the wrong color. Her eyes were brown. These were gray, flat gray like stone. She tilted her head and asked in a voice that wasn't quite hers, "Why?" "I'm having fun. Mr. Garrison brought me new friends to play with." The power company man's smile widened, and I saw that he had too many teeth. Human mouths have 32 teeth. I counted 47 in his smile before my brain refused to process any more. Children love visitors, he said, especially visitors who bring gifts. I brought your daughter several gifts. Would you like to see them? Before I could answer, he opened his mouth wider, impossibly wide, jaw unhinging like a snake's, and small things crawled out from his throat. They looked like insects at first, but as they dropped to the floor and scurried toward Ruby, I saw they had human faces, tiny, perfect human faces, with expressions of terminal agony. Ruby clapped her hands with delight and said, "More friends! Thank you, Mr. Garrison." She started picking them up and they crawled up her arms, disappearing into her sleeves, and I could see small movements under her skin where they burrowed. I moved without thinking, lunging past the power company man and grabbing Ruby's arm. The instant I touched her, pain shot through my hand like I'd grabbed a live wire. Electricity arced between us, and I smelled burning meat. Realized it was my palm cooking where I made contact with her skin. But I didn't let go, couldn't let go. I yanked her toward me and she came up off the floor, light as paper, and I saw that her feet weren't touching the ground anymore. She'd been floating an inch above the carpet, and I'd been too focused on her face to notice. The things that had crawled under her skin began pushing back out, forcing themselves through her pores, and she started screaming, not a child's scream. The sound that came out of Ruby's mouth was ancient and furious, and made every window in the house crack simultaneously. The power company man's pleasant expression finally dropped away, and what remained underneath was something I still see when I close my eyes. His face collapsed inward, the human features folding back to reveal layers of something else. Something that had too many eyes and no nose, and a mouth that was just a wet hole full of writhing parts that might have been tongues or fingers or something without a name. He reached for me and his arm extended like taffy, stretching across the 6 feet between us, fingers growing hooks and barbs. I twisted away, and his hand passed inches from my face, close enough that I felt the cold radiating from it. Wherever his fingers passed, frost formed in the air, ice crystals that hung suspended for a moment before falling like snow. Elena stood up from the couch, and I saw that she wasn't standing under her own power. Something behind her was holding her up, invisible hands wrapped around her torso, lifting her off the ground. I backed toward the door with Ruby in my arms, and she was fighting me now, scratching at my face with nails that had become sharp as glass. Blood ran down my cheeks and I could feel deep cuts opening, but I didn't stop moving. The power company man came after us, his body elongating, becoming serpentine, multiple joints appearing in places humans don't have joints. Behind him, more figures emerged from the walls. They peeled away from the plaster like stickers being removed, 3-dimensional shapes that had been hiding in flat surfaces. A woman in a 1950s dress, a man in farmer's overalls, 2 children holding hands, all of them with wrong proportions, features that had been copied by something that didn't quite understand human anatomy. They surrounded Elena, and I saw tendrils extending from their bodies, connecting to her skin, and she was smiling while they did it, her expression rapturous. I hit the doorframe backing up, and the impact jarred Ruby out of my arms. She fell, and when she hit the floor, she shattered like porcelain. For one horrible second, I thought I'd killed my daughter, that dropping her had broken her into pieces. Then the pieces began moving independently, each fragment scuttling on tiny legs, and I realized what I'd been holding wasn't Ruby. It was something shaped like Ruby, a shell, a puppet. The real Ruby was somewhere else in the house, and I'd just destroyed the decoy they'd put in her place. The fragments swarmed toward me, dozens of pieces of false Ruby all chittering with her voice, saying, "Daddy, why did you break me? That wasn't nice. You need to say sorry. Say you're sorry, Daddy. Say the words. Say sorry, and invite us to stay." The power company man loomed over me, and his mouth hole spoke in a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere. "You can't leave. The invitation was accepted. Your daughter said, 'Come in. Your wife welcomed us. The threshold is open. The house is ours now. You can't leave.'" I grabbed the doorframe and pulled myself to my feet, legs shaking, and said the only thing I could think to say, "This is my house. I revoke your invitation. I command you to leave." The thing that had been wearing Dale Garrison's face laughed, and the laugh was so wrong, so utterly inhuman, that I felt my sanity begin to crack just hearing it. "Revocation requires authority," it said. "You have no authority here. Children hold the power of invitation. Children are pure. Their words carry weight. Your daughter invited us, and children cannot revoke their own invitations. She must live with her choice. You must all live with her choice. Behind the thing, I saw Elena floating higher, being lifted toward the ceiling, and the tendrils connected to her skin were pulsing, pumping something dark into her veins. Her eyes had rolled back in her head, and her mouth hung open, and something was crawling out from her throat, something wet and segmented that pushed past her teeth and tasted the air with a forked tongue. I heard Ruby's voice from somewhere deeper in the house, the real Ruby, screaming for help, screaming my name. But between me and that scream were at least 6 of these things, all of them blocking the path, all of them smiling with too many teeth. The fragments of false Ruby had surrounded my feet and were climbing my legs, tiny sharp pieces cutting through my jeans, and I could feel them trying to burrow into my flesh the way they'd burrowed into the fake Ruby shell. I made a decision, grabbed the doorframe and threw myself backward out of the house, falling onto the porch. The things didn't follow. They stopped at the threshold like they'd hit an invisible wall, their bodies pressed against a barrier I couldn't see. The power company man's face reformed into something almost human, and it said, "You abandoned them. Your wife, your daughter. You left them with us. They're ours now. We'll take very good care of them. We'll make them part of the house, part of the family, forever." I tried to go back in and couldn't. My feet wouldn't move. Some force was holding me on the porch, preventing me from crossing the threshold. I'd revoked my own entry somehow by leaving. The house had rejected me, or accepted that I'd chosen to go, and now the choice was locked in. I screamed and threw myself at the doorway and bounced off that invisible barrier hard enough to crack ribs. Inside, the things gathered around Elena's floating body and began singing. The same tune Ruby had been humming, but with words now. Words in that language that hurt to hear. As they sang, Elena's skin began to change, becoming translucent, and I could see her bones through her flesh, could see her organs shifting and rearranging into new configurations. She was being transformed, remade, becoming something that matched them. The false Ruby fragments had reassembled into a new shape, something that looked vaguely child-sized but with too many joints and eyes in places eyes shouldn't be. It walked on walls like gravity was optional and called out in Ruby's voice, "Daddy, why did you leave? Don't you love us anymore? Come back inside, Daddy. Come play with us, forever and ever and ever." I fumbled for my phone and it was dead. The screen cracked, the battery leaking acid. I ran to my truck and it wouldn't start, the engine just clicking uselessly. Every piece of technology I had access to had stopped working. I was alone on the porch of my own house, locked out while things wearing my family's faces looked at me through the windows and waved. The sun had fully set and the green light was everywhere now, painting the world in shades of nausea. And in that light, I saw other houses in the distance, neighbors' homes, and lights were coming on in them too. Doors were opening. Figures were stepping outside and they moved wrong, walked wrong, and I realized the invitation hadn't just been for my house. Ruby opening the door had been a signal, permission granted to enter any home in the area. Whatever these things were, they'd been waiting for years, maybe decades, for someone to make that mistake. And my daughter, my beautiful, polite daughter who always minded her manners, had finally given them what they needed. I heard engines starting on the distant road, vehicles approaching, and I thought for one desperate second that help was coming. Then the headlights came into view, and I saw the cars were driving themselves, no one behind the wheels, and they were heading toward other houses in the area, delivering more visitors, more well-dressed professionals with clipboards and pleasant smiles and shadows that had too many limbs. This was spreading, an infection jumping from house to house, using the social contract of politeness and hospitality as its transmission vector. Every time someone said, "Come in," every time someone welcomed a stranger, the infection spread to a new location. I watched it happen in real time. Lights coming on across the valley, doors opening, screams starting, and then abruptly stopping as the things that had come calling silenced them. My only option was the basement. If I couldn't get back in through the doors or windows, maybe I could access the crawl space from outside and work my way up through the floor. The basement had an exterior entrance, an old storm cellar door that led to stairs descending underground. I ran around the side of the house, boots pounding on grass, and saw the storm doors ahead. They were padlocked. I'd padlocked them myself 3 years ago after Ruby nearly fell down the stairs. The lock was solid steel, the chain thick enough to anchor a boat. I yanked on them anyway, pulled with all my strength, and the chain snapped like paper. The doors fell open, and a wave of cold air hit me from below. Air that smelled wrong. Not basement smell. Something older. Something that had been waiting. I descended the stairs anyway because Elena and Ruby were somewhere in the house above me, and I had to try. Had to do something other than stand outside and watch through windows while they were transformed into things that wore their shapes. The basement was pitch black, darker than it should be, like the darkness had substance and weight. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight and remembered the phone was dead. There should have been a pull-string light at the bottom of the stairs. I reached for where I remembered it being, and my hand touched something wet and warm. I jerked back and heard something breathing in the darkness. Close, very close, right next to me. I stood frozen on the stairs, hand still extended, while whatever was breathing in the dark shifted its weight. I heard joints cracking, bones settling into new configurations. A voice spoke from the darkness, and the voice was my grandfather's, though he'd been dead for 20 years. "Matthew, you came home? I've been waiting." "That's impossible," I wanted to say. "You're dead. I went to your funeral." But the voice continued. "They got me in '03, the last green sunset before this one. I made the same mistakes you made. Let my guard down. Thought the pattern had broken. They came in through the chimney, would you believe it? Chimneys count as entrances if they're not properly sealed. I learned that the hard way. They transformed me, made me part of the house, part of the family, and I've been down here ever since, waiting for another green sunset, waiting for another member of the family to make the same mistakes. Hello, grandson. Welcome home." A light flicked on, a single bare bulb, and I saw my grandfather standing in the basement. He looked exactly as I remembered. Same flannel shirt, same work boots, same weathered face, except his eyes were gone, just empty sockets, and his mouth was sewn shut with wire. He smiled anyway, the wire cutting into his lips, and blood ran down his chin. Behind my grandfather were others. My grandmother, who died in '98. My Aunt Sarah, lost to cancer in '07. My Uncle John, car accident in '11. All of them standing in the basement, all of them with empty eye sockets and sewn mouths and that same serene smile. They were arranged in a semicircle, and in the center of the circle was a hole in the basement floor that hadn't been there before. A perfect circle of darkness that went down and down and down. My grandfather gestured toward the hole, and his sewn mouth moved, wire cutting deeper, and he managed to say around the obstruction, "This is where we live now, between the earth and the foundation, between existence and void. The house keeps us here, preserves us. We're part of the structure now, part of what makes it strong. Would you like to join us? There's room for one more. There's always room for one more." I backed up the stairs and my grandfather followed, moving in ways that violated physics, his body bending at angles that should have broken bones. Behind him, the rest of my dead family emerged from the darkness, all of them reaching for me with fingers that had too many joints. I made it to the top of the stairs and slammed the storm doors shut, but I could hear them scratching at the wood from below, could hear my grandfather's voice calling my name in that patient, loving tone he'd used when I was a child. The doors bulged outward as the things below pushed against them, and I ran because there was nothing else to do. Ran toward the road, toward anywhere that wasn't the farmhouse, while behind me the building seemed to grow taller, adding floors that hadn't existed before, windows multiplying across the facade, and in every window I saw faces looking out. Some I recognized, most I didn't. All of them were smiling. All of them were waving, inviting me to come back, come home, come be with family. I made it to the road and fell to my knees, gasping, lungs burning. My truck was still in the driveway with the engine running, but I couldn't go back for it. The house stood between me and the vehicle, and going closer to that building was suicide. I looked around desperately for help, for any sign of normal human activity, and saw only other houses lighting up with that same wrong light. Heard only screams cutting off abruptly as visitors were welcomed inside. The entire valley was being consumed by whatever this was, infection spreading house to house, invitation to invitation. How far would it go? How many families would open their doors before someone figured out what was happening and refused entry? I had to warn people, had to find someone who would believe me and help me stop this. A car approached on the road, headlights cutting through the green-tinted darkness, and I waved my arms frantically to flag it down. The car slowed, and I ran toward it, relief flooding through me. Someone was still out here, someone who might have a working phone, who could call for help, who could. The car stopped, and the driver's side door opened and a woman stepped out. She wore a postal service uniform and carried a package. She smiled at me with too many teeth and said, "Special delivery. I'm looking for the Thorne residence. Would you happen to know where that is?" I looked at the package and saw my name on the label, Matthew Thorne. The address was correct. This thing knew exactly where I lived. had come looking specifically for me. I started backing away and she followed, still smiling, the package extended like an offering. "It's very important," she said. "I really need you to accept this delivery. All you have to do is say you'll take it. Say the words. Say, 'I accept.' That's all." I turned and ran, and she didn't chase me. Just stood there holding the package, waiting patiently, because she had all the time in the world and I had nowhere to go. Every house in the valley was compromised. Every building was being filled with things that wore human shapes and waited for invitations. Running was pointless. I was just delaying the inevitable. But I ran anyway, legs pumping, arms swinging, my breath coming in ragged gasps, because the alternative was standing still and accepting the package, accepting whatever transformation came with it, accepting that my family was gone, and the house that had been in my family for generations was now home to something ancient and hungry that had finally found a way inside. I ran until I couldn't run anymore, collapsed on the side of the road 5 miles from the farmhouse, and lay there watching the sky. The green had faded slightly but not disappeared. It hung on the horizon like a promise, like a warning, like a notice that this wasn't over. Somewhere behind me, Ruby was screaming, or something that sounded like Ruby was screaming, and Elena's voice called my name, begging me to come back, come home, come be with them forever. I knew those weren't really their voices, knew my family was either dead or transformed into something that used to be human, but knowing didn't stop the guilt from crushing my chest, didn't stop the agony of having left them behind, didn't stop my body from wanting to turn around and go back, because what kind of husband and father abandons his family? A sheriff's cruiser pulled up beside me, lights flashing, and I nearly cried with relief. The deputy got out and approached cautiously, hand on his weapon, and asked if I was all right. I tried to explain, words tumbling out incoherently, something about green sunsets and things in the house and my family being transformed. The deputy's expression went from concerned to suspicious, and he asked if I'd been drinking. I grabbed his arm and begged him not to go near any houses, not to respond to any calls from that area, not to let anyone invite him inside. He pulled free and told me to calm down or he'd have to bring me in for evaluation. Behind him, I saw his cruiser's radio light up with multiple calls coming in, domestic disturbances, wellness checks, missing persons, all from addresses in the valley. The deputy got back in his car to respond, and I tried to stop him, tried to warn him one more time, but he drove off toward the farmhouse, and I watched his taillights disappear around the bend. 5 minutes later, I heard a single gunshot. Then silence. The cruiser never came back. I walked through the night, following the road away from the valley, and dawn came eventually, like it always does. The green faded with the sunrise, replaced by normal blue sky and white clouds. Birds sang, traffic picked up. The world continued like nothing had happened. I made it to a gas station 20 miles away and borrowed a phone from the attendant, called 911, and reported everything. They sent units to investigate. The officers who went to my farmhouse reported finding nothing unusual, no signs of disturbance, no missing persons. The house was empty and clean. Elena and Ruby were simply gone, along with everyone else in the valley who'd been home that night. 43 people total, all vanished without trace. The official investigation concluded I'd suffered a mental breakdown. Elena had taken Ruby and left me, according to the police theory, and I'd invented the rest to cope with abandonment. They found no evidence of the things I described. No bodies, no blood, no indication anything criminal had occurred. Just empty houses with doors standing open and lights still on. They committed me for 72 hours of observation. I told the psychiatrist everything, and he adjusted my medications. Told me the green sunset was a hallucination brought on by heat stroke and stress, that my family would turn up eventually, that I needed to focus on getting better. They released me after 3 days, and I went to stay with my brother in another state. That was 6 years ago. Elena and Ruby never turned up. Neither did the other 43 people. The farmhouse still stands, empty now, listed for sale but never selling. People who tour it report feeling uncomfortable, sensing they're being watched, hearing voices in empty rooms. The realtor stopped showing it after she went inside alone one afternoon and came out 3 hours later with no memory of the missing time and a smile she couldn't stop smiling for a week. The police investigated but found nothing wrong. Just an old house with old bones. I don't go back there. Can't go back there. But sometimes late at night, my phone rings with calls from my old number, the farmhouse landline we disconnected years ago. And when I answer, I hear Ruby's voice asking when I'm coming home. And I know eventually I will. Because the green sunset will come again, maybe in 5 years or 10, and when it does, I'll be waiting. I'll go back to that house, and I'll walk through the door, and I'll find whatever's left of my family, and I'll make them pay for what they took from me, or I'll join them in whatever hell they're living. Either way, the waiting ends. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.